My name's Karen. I am the executive director of the Software Freedom Conservancy, and I'm going to explain to you what that means and what that is. I am a lawyer. I was an engineer turned lawyer, and the legal work that I do now is all for good. I do pro bono legal work, and with Conservancy, I'm in the executive director role. I am super into free and open source software, like really into free software, and I am a cyborg. And that's because I'm also a patient. I have a big heart. Like, I literally have a big heart. My heart is 3 times the size of a normal person's heart. And it's very thick and kind of stiff. And I'm totally asymptomatic, except that I am at a very high risk of suddenly dying. Like, the doctors actually call it sudden death. It's like the medical term. And so there's like a 2 to 3% chance per year that I'm just going to suddenly die. And it caused me to go to a lot of doctors and to see them and figure out what I needed. And the doctors say, well, don't worry about it. Like, this is a big deal, but you're asymptomatic and you're young, you're fine. And what they do is they have these defibrillator pacemakers, right? They're like, you'll get a defibrillator and it'll be fine. It'll be like somebody following you around with paddles saying clear, and just with you all the time. And if you go into sudden death, then it will revive you, and don't worry about it. And what they do is they have these devices in their office drawers, right? Like, they're totally expensive. People who have these devices often refer to them on online forums as their internal bling. And so they're really expensive. They're like tens of thousands of dollars. I'm excited. I'm about to get a new one, and I can't wait to see the bill for that when the insurance company sends me the report, thankfully. But so the doctor slides one of these defibrillators across the desk for me to hold. And he does this because the device is small and it's light. And it's sort of to say, this is not a big deal, right? Pick it up, hold it. It's not so scary. Just, it'll be implanted. You won't even notice, you won't remember that it's there, and it will save you in case you need it. And I look at it, and my mother is with me in the doctor's office, and I look at it and I say, well, this is really cool. What does it run? And the doctor says, run? And I say, well, yeah, there's software on this device. So can you tell me about the software on this device? And he said, software. My mother said, software. And we had this conversation where I explained that, these devices run with software and how critical it is to make sure we understand what that is, and I'd love to know more about it, and it's as important as understanding what the device does at all. And so he says, well, not to worry, because in my office today is the device from the medical device manufacturer. Tom is here. I will get him to come in, and he will explain to you everything you need to know about the software. This guy's really knowledgeable. So he calls in Tom. Tom comes in, and the electrophysiologist says, Tom, this woman wants to know about the software on this device. And Tom says, software? And it basically, what happened was that nobody had asked about the software on these devices. So my electrophysiologist, who had been implanting thousands of these devices, thousands, often multiple ones in a day, right, had never even once thought to think about the software on these devices. So I dutifully go and I call there. Tom says, don't worry. We have all the information you need. Just call this helpline and they'll figure out what, it was a Medtronic device. Just call the helpline. So I called the helpline and I went into like phone tree hell where, no one could tell me anything. And eventually it became clear that there was simply no way I was going to get access to the source code that was literally going to be implanted in my body and screwed into my heart. And that there was nothing I could do about it, even offering to sign an NDA. And this seemed really, really unfortunate to me. Like, I was so upset by it because the very idea of having this proprietary software as part of me, this is an old internet image of Bill Gates as Borg. And so I decided that I would get this proprietary software in my body, but I would launch an initiative to research the safety and efficacy of medical devices. And what I found was, pun intended, shocking. The devices that we rely on are totally vulnerable. They are subject to attack. Device researchers have shown that because these devices are broadcasting wirelessly, you can take remote control of them, and you can deliver fatal shocks in the case of defibrillators and lethal doses in the cases of insulin pumps. There's no security built into these devices whatsoever. It's the worst of both worlds. It is completely closed and proprietary software with no real security on them at all. There's radio telemetry on almost all of these devices that can't be switched off. It is a total mess. And I also found that free and open source software, security researchers agree, is better and safer over time. It's not automatically better and safer, but it stands a chance. And that systems that are given similar levels of attention over time are safer and less subject to attack. And this turned me from someone who thought that open source was cool and useful, generated a lot of jobs, to someone who became passionate about software freedom and realized that this is a long-term societal issue. And as someone who is outside of the normal use case of my device, right? Like instead of, as a younger woman, I am not the typical user of the product that's been implanted. And so, for example, when I was somewhat recently pregnant, I was unnecessarily shocked because my heart was doing something that normal pregnant women's hearts do. I had a palpitation, and it interpreted as a dangerous rhythm. And instead of understanding that there was a palpitation, I got unnecessarily shocked twice, which is not very pleasant. And I've been shocked 3 times, all unnecessary, I might add. but instead of being able to reconfigure the device, there's no option for that. So as a response, I had to take a drug to slow my heart rate down simply to avoid an unnecessary shock, like an unnecessary treatment for my device. It's so crazy. And if I were much wealthier than I am, if I didn't work for a nonprofit, I still couldn't hire a medical professional that could help me with my problem because I have no access. I can't propose a patch. There's nothing I can do about it, right? And every year that goes by where I experience having this health critical, this life critical device in my body, it becomes clearer and clearer to me that we need control over our critical technology. And so I have moved to completely to the nonprofit side, and I'm helping to promote free and open source software and working to promote free and open source alternatives where they exist, because it's a very short walk from your heart to your car, right? From your defibrillator to your car. We entrust our lives with our cars all the time. From our cars to our voting machines, to our stock markets. And then we're building an Internet of Things, right? An Internet of Things where everything talks to everything else. And we're only as safe as our weakest link, right? When researchers show that cars are vulnerable, they don't immediately go to the ignition system, right? They take control of the entertainment system, or the wheel maintenance system is one that they do a lot. And so, and while those systems are talking to more critical systems, it's possible to get control of those critical systems. So we don't even know what our critical software is while all of our software is talking to everything else. I overheard a joke where somebody said, the S in IoT is for security. So I work at the Software Freedom Conservancy. I co-founded it. It is a nonprofit organization with 40 free software projects. We are the legal home and identity for our 40 free software projects. It is, I can say here with certainty, it is software you're using, because I imagine some of you might be using Selenium. You may have heard of that one. But also Git and Samba Wine, Inkscape. It's a mistake to QEMU. It's a mistake to list some, because then I'd have to list them all. We also we do a whole host of other activities, but our original mission, and our main mission is to look after our projects so that we can help promote alternatives for a better and safer society in the long run. So Conservancy is a charitable organization. It's a 501c3. And we act as the identity of our projects. So when our member projects join us, they are a part of us. We are their foundation. And it's a really convenient arrangement for a lot of reasons that will become apparent as we talk about a lot of the things that we do. But with Selenium, Selenium was a really interesting situation because Conservancy, as Dave said, was brought in really early into the Selenium development process, the organizational development process. So this is Jason Hugs. Raise your hand if you know him, just out of curiosity. And raise your hand if you don't. And everybody applaud these people because everybody who comes in new is like really exciting. And this is not even, many of you probably aren't new. So Jason Huggins was involved in the project early, and it was originally at ThoughtWorks. And there was, in the process of moving Selenium to the next level, Hugs came to us because there were arrangements on the table for venture capital funding of Selenium. And he realized, he was really smart, he realized that by getting independence for Selenium early, it would protect the project. But not only would it protect the project for the community, but it would also protect the project for companies that wanted to get involved later on, and the companies that were involved early. It was a way to create a very healthy ecosystem, both for corporate involvement and for community. And coming to Conservancy means that Selenium has a truly neutral playing ground. The key assets, the trademark, things that are important to the continuing of Selenium happen in a foundation where a single company can't take control anymore. So Conservancy was there as Dave said, as was the entity involved when the first Selenium conference was organized, and we've been there quietly in the background, helping to make sure that the flow of money through the project is rational and in the interest of Selenium in the long run. And when communities make choices that protect the neutrality of the project in the long run, it's healthier for everybody. And you see this time and time again. The short-term decisions, it seems like such a good idea to make sure that, to make the easiest path for money to come in, and often that's through a single company. But at the end of the day, the only way to assure the longevity of the project and to make sure that, that it becomes critical and that an entire ecosystem is born is through this kind of neutrality. I actually have a LibreOffice warning, which is not inspiring much confidence, and it crashed. This is the very first time that I've ever had LibreOffice crash, which is disappointing because I'm always sort of like bragging about how well I do by only using free and open source software. I use only free software in almost everything that I do. I use proprietary software in my Defibrillator, and then occasionally with like proprietary JavaScript. You know, you can't talk to a bank anymore. If anybody tells you that they only use free software, they're either not living in the real world or they're lying, right? Everybody has to use some proprietary software to get by today, and it's where you draw the line. So the important thing, as far as I'm concerned, is to draw the line thoughtfully. And for me, because I'm an advocate for software freedom, I do that everywhere I possibly can, right? Like I'm using this older laptop because I can have Libra boot on it, right? And if it means this is the very first time that LibreOffice has crashed during a presentation, but if that happens once in a while, it's not the end of the world. And the more people that use the free alternatives, the better they'll get, and the less likely that that will happen in the future. So all of these things have been happening, and Conservancy was involved with Selenium early on, and we do it quietly and invisibly in the background, right? How many people had heard of the Software Freedom Conservancy before Simon mentioned us Oh, and there's Simon in his talk. So like just a very less than a quarter of the people in the room. And that's a good thing in many ways, because a lot of the things that we do for Selenium, we do quietly and in the background and invisibly. And as long as there are no problems being seen, it's sort of similar to the point that Denali was making about security and about testing and quality generally, is that it's good when you don't know that it's happening, right? So the way that it works with Selenium being a part of Conservancy is that we don't just take over Selenium. We don't take over our member project and tell them what needs to be done and how to use their money and how to direct the project and how to so there's a steering committee for Selenium, and this is your steering committee, Patrick, Simon, Dave, and Jim. And it's a volunteer role that they do to help steer the project. And they evaluate what is right for Selenium, and any decisions that Conservancy has to make, we take instruction from the steering committee, and we sort of help to make sure that they have the right resources they need, and also make sure that that their decisions are followed, provided that they fit with the charitable mission of Conservancy. But generally, that almost never comes up with our member projects, because all of our Conservancy's member projects, and generally free software projects that are organized in a community way, have these ideologies as a fundamental part, and they're not going to want to abuse, do anything that would not be consistent with promoting free and open source software. So one of the most basic things that we do is to take care of contracts and basic legal stuff. So that's from really boring stuff, if there's anything that needs to be signed on behalf of Selenium, a coffee vendor outside of a conference, I'm the one who gets to sign that agreement. And our general counsel, Tony Sieber, we are a very small, scrappy nonprofit. We've got 4 employees. Our general counsel, we're very top heavy, and that means that everybody has a fancy title but does tons of crummy work. So he'll negotiate it, and then I'll sign it, and we'll take care of it that way. And contracts, many of our member projects hire developers or other people to work on Selenium. So, or on our member projects. Selenium has a contract with a web developer right now to revamp its website. And that's the kind of thing that we take care of. Some of our legal work includes license enforcement, which isn't relevant for Selenium, but because it's perhaps the thing we get the most press about, I thought I would mention it. For our member projects that use use a copyleft license and want to enforce their license, we have an initiative where we will go and tell people that in a very friendly way, we published principles of community-driven enforcement to make sure that we encourage contributions to free software, and that people who are violating copyleft licenses today are likely to be contributors to the community tomorrow if we let them know about how the license works, why it's special, why free software is important, and that they can contribute. We also have a coalition of Linux kernel developers who have asked us to enforce the license on their behalf as well. And so we funded a lawsuit that Christoph Hellwig brought against VMware that got a ton of press. So I think some of you are nodding that you know that we do that. But what's interesting is that we also work in strengthening non-copyleft. So many of our projects, like Selenium, have licenses that are, raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about when I say copyleft. Raise your hand if you have no idea what I'm talking about with copyleft. Oh my gosh, amazing, that's like 3/4 of the room. The free software is predicated on licensing, okay? So the whole idea of sharing comes back to the fact that software is governed by copyright and other regimes. So at the heart of every open source or free software project that you contribute to is a license which tells you why you can share it and use it, why this community can grow up around it. And there are several basic license styles. There's a license that is, there are licenses that are permissive, some people call them dismissive or lax, because they basically say you have permission to do whatever you want with this software, full stop. And then there are copyleft licenses. And copyleft is a hack on copyright. It's basically a license that says you can do whatever you want with this software, provided that if you make changes and distribute those changes, they have to stay under the same license. So it's like a snowballing effect of forever free software. Detractors call it viral. But it's a way that there's an ever-growing body of free software. It's useful because it provides a legal mechanism to ensure sharing going forward. Selenium is under the Apache license, which is a permissive style license that has patent provisions included in it. So it's somewhere sort of in the middle of that spectrum. But it's really good to know what the licenses are of the software that you're contributing to or that you're using, because it's important to understand the terms on which you're sharing with one another. And that's basically, it's funny because a lot of people really don't care about licensing, but it's the mechanism by which the whole thing works. And part of the reason why Conservancy exists is so that, for example, the Selenium community doesn't have to worry too much about this stuff because we've built infrastructure around the use of the license so that we're sure that things are in place. So for example, in Selenium's case, we helped put in place contributor licensing agreements. And then for major companies that were contributing to Selenium or who were interested in contributing to Selenium, we had a lot of phone calls with their legal staff to talk to them about the licensing, or management staff in some cases. So basically talking early on about why Selenium was safe to use and safe to contribute to and how that was going to work. And part of that was putting in place the CLA, the Contributor Licensing Agreement, which is a special kind of CLA that I haven't seen anywhere else, which I think is pretty cool. And if you're like geeky and legally geeky and interested in talking about this stuff afterwards, I'd be happy to. As you can tell, I get really excited about this stuff. We can talk about it at length. We also help handle donations and help fundraise. So when money comes in for Selenium, it comes into the Software Freedom Conservancy, and we track those donations, and we send out thank you letters and gift substantiation letters and make sure it follows IRS rules for 501c3s, and we assist with fundraising. So you may have seen me earlier going around to all of the exhibitors to make sure they were happy with we don't normally attend all the conferences. It's just a treat to be here and to talk to people directly, which is fantastic. Selenium has a sponsorship program. Raise your hand if you didn't know that Selenium had a sponsorship program. So like a quarter of the people. So Selenium as a nonprofit is within Conservancy relies on a lot of volunteer help. And has a lot of has needs in order to make things like things like this conference happen. And so there's sponsorship for the conference, and that's great, and you can see it evidenced by the presence of those sponsors here. But it also has a sponsorship program on its website, and these are the current. The current sponsors, and there are a lot of you, pretty much everyone here almost works at companies that are using Selenium, and it's integral to your business. And so consider going back to your company and suggesting that they become a sponsor of Selenium. It's an easy thing to do, and gets your company's logo out there, and really helps Selenium as a community. We are asset stewards at Conservancy, and so we'll hold the trademark. For example, we filed a trademark registration for Selenium. So if someone were to use the Selenium name and in a confusing way that would make people think that the software was Selenium, but it was actually a proprietary product that had nothing to do with Selenium, or you did some other kind of nefarious thing with it, we would be able to do something about it. So there's an entity behind it, which is really helpful. And we are, as you've seen, totally geeky about legal stuff and love getting this stuff right. So we spend a lot of time on it. Our old motto used to be like, we do the stuff you don't want to. but it doesn't, it's really that we all together do the stuff that we need to get done in order to protect our member projects and to make sure that Selenium stays a vibrant community going forward. And we also support conferences. And so for example, I rarely get to go to our member projects conferences, but I'm always the one who signs the agreements. So it's like especially exciting to be here. Like just simply driving up to the Hyatt, I was like, the venue. We negotiated credit with the venue, and I spoke to Hyatt billing probably 20 times. An example of our invisible work is that the speakers were, and Selenium as a conference is fantastic to speakers. I highly recommend that if you are interested in, have an idea for a talk that might be good at a future Selenium conference, that you just go ahead and submit it. You can even ask me if you want to bounce ideas or something like that. It's really good to put yourself out there, and Selenium is a really great conference for that. Everybody that I have met so far has been like absolutely lovely. Like I think it's a really spectacular community, and coming here in person at the conference has just been like this amazing experience. And so one of the things that Selenium does for its speakers is that it's great for speakers. They pay for travel, and part of that is that they arranged for speakers to be picked up at the airport, which is great. But we had negotiated with the taxi company in advance for them to give us a single invoice. So boring, right? So boring. A single invoice. Couldn't they just give us a single invoice? Nobody wants to talk to a taxi company more. And they were a perfectly fine taxi company, but they didn't get their communication right internally. So when they started picking up speakers on Friday, our credit card kept getting charged for each of those rides, which then caused a fraud warning on our credit card, which then froze all of our charges that were in process, which wasn't just for Selenium, but our 40 other member projects. And so suddenly we're calling all of our everybody who's relying on us to have any charges processed that day and saying, no, we're really good for this. We promise we're fine, don't worry. And by the time we got it was very exciting, and it started at like 6 a.m. on Friday morning. So it's the kind of thing that like, you should never see that. The community should never see that, right? Like we can take care of it, but it's the painful things that happen. And the committee that organizes this conference does so much. They work so hard, and they're doing it as volunteers. And to give them one more of those things on their plate, it would just be impossible. So supporting things. So we do a lot of support. We support conferences, and we do a lot of other activities too. One of our member projects actually is called Outreachy. Raise your hand if you have heard of Outreachy. So just a few people here. Outreachy is an internship program that we run for women and non-binary people globally, and for people of color who are underrepresented in US tech. So within the US, it's also expanded to underrepresented people of color. And it's a 3-month paid internship. It happens twice a year, consistent with both hemisphere summers. And it tracks, raise your hand if you've heard of Summer of Code. So more, like half. Okay. So it was inspired by Summer of Code, and the idea is that these underrepresented people can take advantage of paid internships where they get hooked up with mentors and contribute to a free software project for a period of time, and then come out at the other end with experience. And they've done all of that work in the public, and they're a part of that free and open source software project. We've been, the program was rebooted in 2009, and since then we've had hundreds of interns, over 400 interns now, I think, and great metrics. We're like, I think it's like 60, and I should have consulted the statistics before this talk, but it's something like 50 or 60 of our graduates have now given full-length talks at tech conferences. I think over 50 have found employment at our sponsoring organization. It's been amazing. I'm cognizant of this amazing captioning as I'm giving statistics that I think are not actually very good. But Outreachy has been an amazing success, and it's caused, like, there was one woman who was mopping floors and she became a manager at a major tech company. Another woman was working at a cheese counter at Whole Foods and is now a Linux kernel developer. Just about 30 women are now kernel developers through our program. It's had a real impact. And it's something that we also run, and we're only, again, 4 people, and there are about 80 interns per year, or a little bit more. And I would encourage the Selenium community to think about participating, in part because having a public commitment to diversity makes a big difference, but then also the benefit of having, inviting more people into your community who are underrepresented is really important. And I'd be very happy if anybody wants to talk in the hallway track about this too. The stats on unconscious bias, the mountain of evidence that supports to why we need to take action and how bad the situation is in free and open source software in particular is amazing. I started out when I was a student. I thought it was a mistake to even talk about women in tech, and that we were hurting we're hurting women in tech by even talking about it, because we were drawing attention to it, and it drove me nuts. I would go on these rants about how affirmative action was terrible, and having just had an open mind as a scientist and looking at the mountain of data, I've done a complete 180, and I think these programs are essential, and the bias that is in our field is just astounding. But back to Software Freedom Conservancy. So we provide mentorship, advice, and guidance for our projects that runs the gamut for whatever our projects need. We have a lot of experience in free and open source software, so whatever comes up is something that we are happy to help with. Sometimes it's we're not getting new contributors. How can we deal with that? And in that case, it might be simply like, hey, let's have monthly meetings where we invite anyone who wants to come, and let's have an IRC channel, or write a series of blog posts about what's going on with the project. And it could be all kinds of things. And as we accumulate that experience, it becomes more helpful. And we're also now beginning to have ways for our member projects to talk to each other so that they can benefit from it. Like coming to this conference, I can see how awesome the Selenium conference organizing team is, and would love to to get them in touch with some of our other member projects who struggle with conferences. And so it's pretty great. And as I said earlier, we hire contractors. So many of our member projects have hired developers to work on their projects, or other contractors to help, usually in some area where volunteers, where the regular contributors are just not that interested. It's not that exciting. It's the hard work nobody wants to do. It's not super urgent, but it improves the project overall, where no one company wants to take on all of that work, but it improves the project in the long run, and it really works. We also, for our communities that have it, there's each project of Conservancy has its own governance structure based on how it's run and how it formed, and so some of them have elections, and we do that too. Basically, we do everything that we need to do to keep our project safe. Whatever threats we can anticipate, we try to put legal mechanisms in place. We protect the financial assets too, and we provide education and advocacy to make sure that people understand why free and open source software is important, and why our member projects are important. So Selenium actually is in a great financial situation right now. Dave gave me permission to sort of share the number, and I was looking for a more recent number, so I'll actually check my text messages to see if I have a more recent number. No, I don't actually, because there's so many expenses coming in for the conference, and like expenses and income, and everything's in serious transition. So Selenium right now is having this, like, if you look one day, it will have one amount, and the next day it'll be off by like $50,000. It'll be $50,000 different. But it's over $200,000 that Selenium has saved up now, which is an extremely exciting position for Selenium to be in that it can finally take care of a lot of stuff. And so this is fantastic. For example, as I said before, there's already been a web developer hired to revamp the Selenium website. As many of you know, going to the Selenium website, it really needs a lot of love. So it's exciting that that's that's in place. The Selenium Steering Committee has committed to diversity and committed to using its money to do things like fund speaker travel and do other travel stipends for contributors to make sure they can get to the conference, and that's huge. And so that's where things are now, and the committee is now evaluating other options of what is the right thing to do with the money now to make sure that Selenium has the best chance of success in the long run. And that includes things like working on documentation, and hiring a contractor to do that is one idea that they're evaluating, or having a contractor to push forward core and really important fundamental things about Selenium. So I think also another idea bouncing around is to hire someone to help with conference organizing and admin stuff. So what's really exciting about this is that this steering committee is really friendly, and several of them are in the room. Raise your hands if you're here so Jim and Simon are already here. So if you have, and Dave is right back there. So if you have ideas and opinions about how Selenium should spend its money and improve itself, you should engage in this process. There's really a lot of opportunity. A lot of people have come over to me in this conference and asked me, how do I get involved with Selenium? How can I help forward the organization? I'm not a coder, or it's not my strength, or I'm working on it and I hope to work towards that, but I'd like to do something now. Getting involved with the administration of Selenium, getting involved with the conference. The conference organizing team is so amazing, and they have killed themselves. You see Marcus and Ashley and Dave and Bill McGee, I don't know if he's in here, but Bill, and who am I forgetting? Manoj, Anand is not here, but so you should, if you see a conference organizer or anyone with an orange shirt, give them a high five. They need it. They made it through this conference, and just thank them, because it's incredible. But there's so much opportunity to help out. Like even like tracking, the sponsors on the website, and emailing people and asking them to renew, or volunteering with the badges at the next conference. Everything that you do, there's high and low level things that you can do that will really help. And there's a lot of opportunity to help drive the direction of the project, and even to join the steering committee. So all of this sort of making sure that Selenium and our other member projects are safe and have the best chance to succeed is fundamental to me, because if we don't promote free and open alternatives, we're going to be stuck with proprietary software. And we're building so much infrastructure based on products from single companies that don't have the kind of accountability that infrastructure should have. We know that software is better and safer over time when it's free and open, but we're not really doing anything about it in a sort of bigger societal way, which I think is essential. This statistic really gets me every time. 3 million people in the world have defibrillators, and every year 600,000 are implanted, or pacemakers. 600,000, right? If we're lucky, we will all be cyborgs, right? Like if we're lucky, we're all going to have our lives rely on this software. And as our software converges, we don't even know what software is going to be critical for our lives or for our children's lives. And with free and open source software, when it feels like we're at a dead end technologically wise, we might just be at the beginning. We don't even know. So I want to thank you so much for having me, and please consider donating and becoming a supporter to the Software Freedom Conservancy. We're a charity, and we do the best we can, and we rely very much on these donations. And also consider donating to Selenium, because and asking your employer to donate to Selenium, because if we can get a bigger cushion there, we can do a lot of really exceptional things. Well, thank you very much. We have 5 minutes for questions. Oh, thank you.
I actually have
two questions.
Okay.
Is there, okay. Well, we only get one as long as there are other people who may have questions.
Anybody else has questions? Right there. I can always ask.
Do you participate in any other actions or tactics to promote free and open software, lobbying, organization, anything like that?
I do a lot of education activities, so I've done a lot of public speaking and a lot of interviews, and I've written a bit about it as well. Conservancy is a C3 charity, so we can't do any lobbying. We did apply and got an exception to the DMCA and the 1201 rulemaking process for smart TVs. So smart TVs, many of them have the Linux kernel in it. But if you get a smart TV with a Linux kernel in it, it has technological protection measures that you can't circumvent if you want to adjust the software in your TV. So we had kernel developers who wanted to hack on their TVs that had software that they had written on it and they couldn't access it. And as you may know, many of the new TVs, the smart TVs, they're surveillance machines. It's like literally Big Brother. The TV is on the wall, and because it's got voice recognition and voice activation, it is listening to you 24 hours a day. And the terms and conditions explicitly say they can share that information with third parties, which is crazy. And if you want to go into your own TV that you bought in order to change it so that it doesn't surveil you, well, before we got the exception, could have potentially had criminal liability for it under the DMCA. Crazy, right? So we worked on that, and then personally, as an individual, I worked on an exception also for the DMCA for medical devices, and we've got that exception as well. So now at least it's safe to research it, and so through advocacy and other work, that's where I'm trying to draw attention to it. So we had 2 questions. So
I think it's kind of a follow-on. So I work for a company. How can I help my company internally kind of educate themselves on the matter?
So the best thing to do if you want to educate your company about free and open source software, there are a lot of great ways that you can do it. I've actually gone in to speak to a lot of companies about my medical devices situation, and I have a little bit more of a corporate-friendly talk that I give. So circulating information like that. Putting together a list of all of of a lot of the software that is critical to the business of your organization, and showing how that that success connects to volunteer and community activity has also been really powerful. And then one of the secret tricks that I have for people when they're trying to advocate for spending inside their, basically, freeing up budget to sponsor free software projects is to try to put a dollar amount on how much it would take in order to replace the software that is free and open. So 2 numbers. 1, what would it take if it's just disappeared and you had to replace it entirely? And the second, what would happen if there were no support for it whatsoever and you had to completely maintain it yourself? And that tends to be pretty effective. Companies really respond to employees really engaging. Developers and other employees have a lot more power than they think. And one of the things that we're doing to sort of amplify that is a project called Contract Patch that we're working on, which is to educate developers about their employment agreements so that they can better negotiate them, and working on standard contract language so that, for example, employees can have clarity on the fact that the things that they work on their own time are owned by them and stuff like that. And so a variety of things that the more employees ask for these things, the more clear it becomes if just for talent retention, the company will make overtures on doing the right thing. Did you had a question, Marcus? Or?
The only question I had was, what is CC by SA 4.0? What's that license?
Oh, it's Creative Commons. So just like the free software licenses that come in copyleft and permissive, there are free culture licenses. And Creative Commons is an entity that Larry Lessig, who you may have heard of, he was inspired by the free software movement, and he went and he created a culture movement and established that organization. And they have a suite of licenses. And the copyleft license is CC by SA, which is the SA stands for share alike, as in share and share alike. And the by means that you have to provide attribution. So if you use this license, it's got that forever free effect, and you also have to say, you have to give credit. and preserve the license notice. And it's 4.0, which I highly recommend over earlier versions of CC5 because the cure provisions are great. Again, totally happy. And we are totally out of time, but happy to geek out about this stuff with you in the hallway if you'd like. Thank you so much for coming and listening.
Thank you, Kara.